Issue 30. We start out with Sonic having a good dream about Uncle Chuck overfeeding him with chili dogs and getting him fat in the process. Wait, that's a good dream? It's explained that Sonic dreams about his uncle a lot because he really misses him, and this adds to his character, making him more sympathetic, although it also really drives the point home that he barely talks about this aspect of him at all, which I can understand because there's only so much space in the comics, and I'd rather have that space spent on plot progression and action and stuff than Sonic depressing us over how much he misses his uncle over and over again. And it does make sense that he'd be the type to keep this to himself most of the time, wanting to look strong and not worry people, but still, Sonic's desire to free Uncle Chuck was really underplayed so far. It's practically like it was forgotten about. Anything for my favorite nephew. Is that just an expression, or does he have more than one nephew? Wait, what the fuck? They retconned it? I remember Sonic seeing Uncle Chuck as a robot working in a factory of Eggmans very clearly, and Sally wasn't there. This is confusing. Not to mention, he was supposed to be disguised as a robot. Remember, Sonic had the eyes? He was disguised as a robot? But he doesn't look like that at all here. And what's worse is he's acting as if he's seeing him as a robot for the first time, rather than him seeing him as a robot for the first time among a crowd of roboticized people, or in a crab meat factory. So basically, we've gotten the story of how he first met his roboticized uncle rewritten 3 times by this point. It's so confusing. It's like they couldn't decide. I really like how Sonic is upset and blaming himself over how he still hasn't saved Uncle Chuck yet, showing self-awareness and insecurity in depth rather than not caring and blindly assuming he'll save him eventually. He is right though, he could have saved him. Remember that de-roboticizer Eggman arbitrarily made? Sonic could have saved Uncle Chuck with that, but the possibility wasn't even mentioned, in favor of offering it to Bunny and then wasting its one usage on a stupid plan to turn Sally into a robot. Though that would have felt like a cheap way to save him, since again, the whole fact that Eggman made a de-roboticizer was bullshit in the first place. Then we cut to Eggman testing the trans-dimensional transporter on Sonic's uncle, of all people. I like how Snively is being the reasonable one here, pointing out that Uncle Chuck was the most efficient robot. That little tidbit gave me more respect for Uncle Chuck, as I imagine that he was an excellent worker by his very nature, even before being roboticized, and it shined through there. And also, it's good that they thought to put text at the bottom of the panel, explaining that the trans-dimensional transporter was the device that was used to send King Acorn, into the Zone of Silence. I say it's a good thing because otherwise this invention would come completely out of nowhere. Also, why did it need to be repaired in the first place? I'm assuming that Sonic destroyed it in a rage, but how? Eggman does have a good point saying that if the test proves successful, he can just bring Uncle Chuck back anyways. And if it's not, I'll roboticize you and you can take his place. That just brings up the question of why he hasn't roboticized Snively a long time ago. That's not something they should bring up. Again, I'm sure the meta reason is he's more appealing as a human, but logically, why hasn't Eggman roboticized him the first chance he got? I always like it when Snively insults Eggman, although it does bring up the question of why he doesn't keep it to himself instead of saying it out loud like an idiot right in front of him. It's a miracle Eggman hasn't ever punched him for that. Snively says he's running a quick test on the power lines, and Eggman says a line that actually made me laugh. Why are you running a test of a test? I can imagine that with voice acting and everything. Shouldn't Eggman already know why he's doing this? He made the invention, didn't he? Then Eggman arbitrarily pushes Snively out of the way and says he'll do it himself. But he just said he doesn't understand why Snively's doing a test on a test. So why would he ever consider doing it himself if he thinks it's pointless? And through the power of arbitrariness, Eggman pressing the button sends him to a different dimension for absolutely no reason. How the hell did this mistake even happen? He wasn't in the tube, Chuck was. How could someone unintentionally program the machine to make this mistake? Conveniently, he immediately is able to talk to Snively through his television monitor and tell him that he's in the void. I really love how Snively stands out to Robotnik and refuses to bring him back home. This is the appeal of Snively then, and I kind of like what I'm seeing. He's definitely a more interesting character than Eggman is. Toxic waste on your toothbrush? Again, using that would kill a man. And it's never explained what Eggman is, so it's just confusing. After Snively decides to be the main villain instead, we see that the bungled test had another side effect. It gave Uncle Chuck back his free will. Yeah, just like that. That was easy. So after all this time and all this climactic build-up, Uncle Chuck gets saved by a nonsensical Deus Ex Machina. I honestly don't see how Eggman's machine could have screwed up like that, but it did. Somehow. I'm glad that Uncle Chuck is free though, and I'm even more glad that he actually has a good design at long last instead of having creepy black and red eyes like he used to. After Uncle Chuck cooks Sonic and his friends some chili dogs to prove to them that he's got his free will back, Nicole uses an omniscient psychic god once again as Sally asks her what the most likely result of an attempt by Snively to take over the world would be. And she magically knows the answer. Doom for everyone. At least she phrases it as the most likely result, so she's still more realistically just making an educated guess, and it makes sense that she comes to that conclusion because Snively has a basically doomsday device, but still. Also, take over Mobius? I thought Eggman already had taken over Mobius. Wouldn't that be redundant? I perfectly understand Antoine's reaction here. Any normal person would be panicking at that point. I do really respect Uncle Chuck's intelligence here for coming up with a plan that serves as the perfect spy, since Eggman and Snively don't know what's happened to him yet. Robotnik, who's still on the TV monitor and able to communicate with Snively, insults him for wearing the same uniform as him, and somehow fitting in it when it's 3 sizes too big. Red's not even your color! That's true, good point. Snively explains that instead of trying to capture the Freedom Fighters and imprison them in the Void, which was Eggman's plan, I'm glad they bothered to tell us this, by the way. Snively says that he's going to attach a smaller trans-dimensional transporter to a bot plane, which will swallow up great sections of Mobius, and the Freedom Fighters too. This way he'll cut out the middleman and not have to worry about trying to capture the heroes. Problem is, he's single-mindedly only focused on that task, and on the fact that it'll destroy the world he's living in the process. Seriously, he's living in the world. Why would he want to destroy it? That doesn't make any sense. After Eggman naturally tells him that he's taking too big of a risk, and Snively refuses to listen, Uncle Chuck is told to instruct the robots to do what Snively wants, and he thinks, and then I gotta contact Sonic. This is way past serious. First off, and then? I guess he can't get away with not following the order and telling the robots to build that plane. And second, way past serious? That, along with stuff like gotta juice, is part of the dialogue that dates this comic. Although I've been coping with it rather well by just thinking of it as the way that the people in the Sonic comic universe talk. Like it's a different dialect from ours that makes the world more unique. After Sonic runs into the hangar looking for the bot plane, Snively proves that he's a much more competent villain than Eggman in some sense by effortlessly trapping Sonic in the Void. He also lets a monitor let Sonic communicate with him while he's trapped there, so that he can gloat, presumably the same reason he didn't break the monitor letting Eggman talk to him. Let me guess. This causes Eggman to return home because Snively accidentally swapped him with Sonic. Why does Snively take offense to being called a sicko? Shouldn't he be embracing it? And why does he think making a forest disappear will prove Sonic's wrong about being a sicko? And why didn't he aim at the Great Forest instead of some random forest? He could have easily wiped out Knothole just like that! Snively gets fired on in his flying plane by a bot plane, which is being piloted by Uncle Chuck. So I guess him being able to pilot a plane makes sense considering engineers can do literally everything science related in the Sonic series. I appreciate Chuck getting to have a hero moment, that's pretty cool. And I also appreciate Sonic getting to think of a smart plan to distract Snively and get him to slow down. Although I honestly wonder how the hell chili dogs can make a crunch sound to distract him. And he likes the taste of those things, so it's not like they're horribly burnt or anything. Maybe the sound effect board is just inaccurate, but either way, eating chili dogs isn't that loud. This would have worked much better if Sonic had chips instead, though they wouldn't have worked as well as a check of Scun with him still having chili dogs his uncle made. The worst part is this didn't need to happen. Sonic could have easily distracted him in a much less convoluted way, like suddenly screaming an insult or something confusing at him. With Snively distracted, Chuck fires a laser that knocks out Snively's thruster so that he can't go forwards anymore. And now Snively proves himself to be much less competent than Eggman by saying he's going to blow up the plane and the transdimensional transporter with it and send everything within a 100-mile radius into the void. Snively? That would include yourself, which would make it impossible for you to rule the world and completely ruin your plan. Even Sonic points that out, but Snively at least reveals he's smarter than Ant by saying he is conveniently wearing a device that will ensure him a return trip, while Sonic will spend an eternity with Eggman. An eternity? What, so the void grants you eternal life? Good thing, considering you can't eat or drink or anything in there. Doesn't seem to be any food. And of course, right as Snively says this, Eggman steps in and reveals that my guess was right. He was sent back home from being swapped with Sonic, and was even in the plane with Uncle Chuck the whole time. I guess Uncle Chuck thought he had to set Eggman free because Eggman would be the only one who could stop Snively at this moment. Good thing he thought of that ahead of time. Eggman says that in exchange for his freedom, he had to promise not to harm the freedom fighters with Snively, and will keep his word for once, uncharacteristically. At least there's text saying that we'll see how long that lasts, so the writers were self-aware of how ridiculous that was. Eggman says he'll keep Snively working with him just to make him miserable for years to come. At this point I'm really wondering why he won't just roboticize him out of spite, and orders him to take his uniform off. I actually chuckled at him saying the boots stuck. That was pretty funny. What the hell? They don't even bother to explain why Sonic escapes the void? That's lazy as shit. Oh, I guess Eggman was feeling really generous that day. At least have a panel where Eggman falls on a button by accident and sends Sonic home. I'm guessing the reason Eggman isn't going to focus on getting Uncle Chuck back right away is because he's hiding in Knothole, and Eggman has no idea where Knothole is. Somehow. Because sending flying robot drones to scour the forest and reveal to him his location from GPS and camera would make too much sense. Then we have a second story by Paul Castiglia. Oh, new writer. Where Eggman complains that people are stealing his Chaos Emeralds, and says that the culprit has been recorded on tape, but his identity was obscured by the shadows. And he tells Coconuts to go to his secret island base and protect the remaining emeralds, instead of sending a much more powerful and capable robot to do so. Also, why does Coconuts care if there's bananas on that island? It's not like he can eat them. Why would Eggman waste time programming him to love bananas? And he never does find bananas and eat them, so that was a pointless waste of time. Coconut says that he's found the thief heading for the cave, and brags about having gotten a great book of traps from a coyote friend. I'm guessing he stole it from Antoine? Why would Antoine have a book of traps for the villain to conveniently take advantage of? He's not evil, I assume. Of course, Coconuts gets hurt by the traps instead, although logically he should have gotten demolished from the first one. So I guess the book was intentionally made as a trap for him, where he'd make traps that would only screw up on him. That's what the last panel is revealing. And then the last panel really confuses me because it ends with Bunny and Sally making puns about the emeralds being a hit at the charity ball, while never actually showing the Chaos Emeralds being there, being held by them. And Bunny's wearing jewelry, but Eggman clearly called them Chaos Emeralds, so they couldn't have been literal jewelry for them to wear. It's not like the story was a subversion where it turned out they were just stealing regular jewelry all along. That wasn't funny, it was just confusing. And after it is one panel not even worthy of being called a story because it just serves as a setup to lead into the next issue, Knuckles Chaotix. I was hoping that we'd at least get establishing character moments for all the Chaotix as Eggman watches them in the monitors, but no! It's just Eggman seeing images of them. That was boring. Most of the issue was written by Angelo, and while I absolutely love seeing Snively being the main villain and contrasting himself from Eggman here, making him feel like a more distinct character and becoming interesting, and I love the concept of being able to send things into the void. That was a cool device of the villains. But the fact remains that this was a very underwhelming resolution to the Uncle Chuck being enslaved plot point, because Sonic isn't even allowed to be the one who saves him. Instead of properly resolving it, they just have him get teleported out of Eggman's base and regain his free will from it for absolutely no reason. He gets saved by Duke's Ex Machina. That's so disappointing. I guess the writers didn't have faith that they could make Sonic saving him exciting and interesting enough to last an entire story. And I don't really blame them, since the only other solution at the time would be to have another de-roboticizer plop right into Sonic's lap, after which the story would just consist of Sonic zapping Uncle Chuck back to normal in the factory and effortlessly carrying him home. But him getting his free will back while still being a robot is a lot more confusing, even if a nice compromise because he looks better this way. But still, someone reading the later issues without reading this issue would wonder, wait, why does he have his free will when he's still a robot? And they would ask someone, and they wouldn't be able to tell them the answer. As for the second story, it's harmless fun. There's nothing really to say about it, other than it makes no sense that it even happened in the first place, because why would he just send coconuts there instead of a more powerful robot? And the last panel was really confusing, and I liked how they tricked Coconut with a fake trap book. That was pretty smart of them. But yeah, it's harmless fun. Next up is the adaptation of Knuckles Chaotix, and I'm really excited to see how exactly it'll go.